Go for it.
Yeah. Does this? Yeah, it's picking me up. All right. How are you, Dr. Nick?
Yeah, not bad. Had a nice couple days in Zion with Gina, so it was good.
Ooh. I have a friend who's
Yeah,
out doing some Zion. Man, it's so beautiful.
it is. Yeah, I mean it's only like 3.5 hours away from us, so it was like no traffic at all. It's kind of half shut down, like half the stops are shut down, but we just wanted to go do the hike up in the Narrows and do some other shit. So you can do that.
Yeah. There. I think this works. I think I can get away with having have a. Yeah. Do you guys are you camping or something like that?
Yeah, we camped. I mean, like car camping, but yeah, I have like a four-person tent, so it's chill.
Dude, when you car camp, do you just pull over somewhere, or what do you have to look for? I've never really done it. I think I'm gonna do it soon, though.
Well, okay, no, so we stayed at this place called the Zion Ponderosa Ranch, which has like campsites. So you just drive into the campsite. There's like a fire pit,
Got it.
area for your tent. No, there was like very few people there. I mean, it was not crowded.
So you are basically just looking up like camps, like regular campsites, is what you would look for, and then you could just.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's more fun to go. Like my preference is to just be around no one. Like get
Yeah.
a wilderness permit and try to like be around, or just kind of go for it and be around no one. But then you got to bring in all your own water. That's really the
Sure.
barrier. Like my setup, my like tent and sleeping bag setup is light enough to like hike it no problem. But carrying 6 gallons of water is like
Yeah.
not fun. So we
Yeah. I don't.
just
It's. I just asked because
and
I'm
then
like, if you don't grow up camping, it's. I don't know. It's for some reason I'll just feel so inaccessible. I'm always like, what are the? There's got to be rules I'm messing up. There's got to be You can't just go anywhere. I was literally just looking up
well,
BLM land.
in the parks you're supposed to get a wilderness permit, but and like yeah, you don't want to be on somebody's fucking property, but it's so cheap. Like these campsites are like $30 a night,
Yeah.
so it's really cheap.
Yeah, that sounds great. I want to do some of that. I just downloaded this app called Free Roam, I think it's called, and it's free. It's a free app. It's some nonprofit that just wants to get people on public lands, I guess. But it's like
Oh,
maps with
cool.
overlays, and you can turn on like BLM land, national forest land, stuff like that. 'Cause
Oh,
I want
that's
to
great.
I want to film something stupid that will require BLM land. uh, so I was like trying to look up BLM land. But anyway, well, I think I'm just gonna like dive into. Let's just dive into some questions because we got a few mailed in question things. This one wasn't so much a question. It was a statement. It starts off a little. I mean, we're starting off a little dark, I guess today. But I feel like I want to just start with this one. This came in like last week after the pod. I didn't really, you know. So this person wrote this sort of brief, almost a poem. My body is good. I sleep good and have no problem eating. Tried talking to a professional, but I have not enough of a depression. Every day I think it would feel great to not live. Living is too much work. And I read that and I was like, well, we should bring this up. I relate to those feelings. It sounds a little like I guess what I've heard called dysthymia, which is something I've been told I have. But what do you this one thing like tried talking to a professional, but I have not enough of a depression. Like that's I
Yeah,
feel like that's related to another person who wrote, and I'll probably ask about later. But like this feeling that something's wrong, but maybe it's not wrong enough or whatever, you know?
yeah. I mean, so look, I think when someone says that they are feeling like they don't want to be alive, even if they don't have an active plan about how they are going to end their life, even if it's a more what's called like passive suicidality, that's very serious and they need to
Yeah.
go get treatment. So I don't know if this person just talked to a bad therapist, of which there are many, just like there are a lot of bad mechanics. I mean, if they talked to a bad therapist and the therapist was like, oh, you're not depressed enough to see me, I mean, that's just a lunatic answer. So you got to there's no barrier, like there's no depression barrier beneath which you don't deserve to see a therapist. If you're paying them money, they should see you. If
Yeah.
or if you're feeling bad enough that you think you should go, you should be supported by your insurance to do that. So it's just going to take some time. It's going to take some time, unfortunately. Just like finding a good realtor or a good mechanic or a gym that you like, just is going to take time. And that sucks when you're feeling depressed because it's like all barriers feel insurmountable. It's the nature of the illness. And that's why I think you've probably heard us talk on here before about recruiting some help to sit down with you and find an afternoon and make like 3 or 4 appointments,
Yeah.
and like go kind of shopping for your therapist. But if you're feeling suicidal or like being alive is too much work, you absolutely need to be in therapy. It's not a question of not being depressed enough. You need to go, and you have to probably make several appointments until you find the person who's right for you. And there's going to be a lot of ways to talk yourself out of that. But the fact remains
Right.
that if you feel like being alive is too much work and that you don't want to be alive because of how much work it is, you have to go to a therapist.
That I guess the question I want to ask on top of that, and I feel like I know that the right answer is just go see therapy, figure out therapy, that kind of thing, for sure. But in a micro and in that thing of like, I think when you're in those states, even the smallest impediments can feel like, see, the universe doesn't want, you just, that'll stop you, right? So obviously enlisting a friend, great idea. Do you have anything you give people like as, I don't know, like I'm not a doctor and I just have my like don't kill yourself list thing that I would do all the time. I would just sort of like try to list things that I find objectively reasons to keep living, or good experiences that, like, no matter how bad a mood I'm in, I'm like, so even if you're in the worst mood ever, you get a good cup of coffee, you always like that. So that's on your, I mean, are there exercises or things you can do by yourself in like crisis or in bad places that like you actually would advise or that you actually think are like good to do?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's tricky because there aren't any kind of like. The problem with depression is that the reason depression is not a personality is that everybody who's depressed has the same feelings and expressions, which is what tells you that it's an illness, right? I
Yeah.
mean, everyone who's depressed is like, nothing makes me happy. I don't want to do anything.
Right.
Things I used to enjoy are not fun anymore. I don't see any hope in the future. It's gray and bleak. What's the point? I don't want to be here. That's the nature of depression. So everyone who has depression expresses those sentiments, which is why it's not unique to like this person. Like,
Right.
oh, that's just your personality, buddy. No, it's not. It's depressive illness. It's depressive. The thoughts that you're expressing and the feelings that you're expressing are the thoughts and feelings of depressive illness, right? Including the thought
Yeah.
like, oh, this isn't serious enough. I don't deserve to feel better. I don't deserve treatment. I'm just lazy. It's my fault. All this stuff. This is just the nature of depression. Like, if we look in the DSM and check those off, we'll see right there that we're talking about the criteria of depressive illness. So it's not you, it's depressive illness, and it requires treatment. And, just kind of, yes, in the short term, coming up with things to keep you engaged in the process of living and trying to get help, like that's important. But
Mm.
the long-term solution is going to be treatment. It's going to be treatment and change. Like that's going to be the long-term solution. So, I think, yes, the good news is that there's absolutely hope. Millions of people recover from depressive illness every year. So there's absolutely hope. Um, you will be able to recover from this illness, but you need to get engaged in that process, and it's going to take work.
Yeah.
That's the good news too, is that by working on it with someone who is good, not someone who fucking tells you you're not depressed enough for therapy, with someone who's good, you will get better. I mean,
Yeah.
for sure. There's lots and lots of stuff you can try.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good evidence behind it. And if you're sleeping well and eating and you're, physically feeling healthy, that's awesome. That means you're like a bunch of the work is already happening. So that's fantastic. I mean, it would be much worse if that stuff wasn't going on.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, this is why I think we emphasize a lot here that it's important to, it's not like just go get therapy. No, like, get a responsible friend. Get the responsible friend who's the one who like plans the vacation. Get the producer of the group, get the producer and make a time and ask them. Say, hey, would you sit down with me for like 4 or 5 hours and just like fucking help me schedule 5 therapy appointments? And it might take 2 days for you guys to do that because it's a pain in the ass, especially if you can't just pay out of pocket. You might have to call your insurance, get a list of providers, call like 5 numbers that don't work, call another number, tell they don't have time, or it's a month away, and then call more. Like it's gonna be a process,
Yeah.
but that's the process you have to engage in.
So yeah, it's very
Or just
frustrating.
like in terms of, yeah, it sucks, man. That's why you got to like get your friends to help you. Um, but in the short term, yeah, like this can get better. This is not an untreatable problem. That's like, oh, therapy won't work, or like depression treatment won't work because I don't have enough depression. Yes, you do, and yes, it will. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah. I thought there was a sort of, I'm just gonna read this other person's question who came in that felt similar. It's kind of long, just story-ish. I'm gonna just share the whole thing. And this person's from Argentina, which is interesting, and a bike delivery person, which just has to do with something they say later. Okay, I'm
Damn,
gonna
bro,
skip
it's like
to
my wife's like brother. Fuck.
really, maybe it is. I don't know. I've always felt off, lacking in social skills, depressed, sometimes anxious. I don't know. Listening to you talk about ADHD sounds so familiar, but I don't know if ADHD is the issue. I believe I might be on the autism spectrum, but I don't want to self diagnose. I tried talk therapy a long time ago, but here in Argentina, most psychologists are Freudian, and I really didn't like what felt like just aimless talk. That was the common thread I felt like. This, you know, not depressed enough, or the wrong, what does your therapist say? Even though the therapist wasn't a good fit for me, I went weekly for over a year, maybe 2. I have such a crappy memory. I don't know. Anyway, the guy didn't even hint at a diagnosis. Earlier this year, I decided to get help again, even got an appointment, but just a few days before the date, we went into strict quarantine, so it got canceled. We still aren't allowed to have in-person sessions, so I'm just waiting. I recently listened to one of your brain breathers, which really resonated with me. You kept saying that sometimes you get these "I'm a piece of shit" thoughts, which I all the time. You repeated it a couple times, which reminded me of this BoJack clip, which I'll include this clip later. There's a good BoJack Horseman clip that I was like, I've watched BoJack Horseman. I don't remember this part, but it explains part of why I like that show. Of him just being like, "Oh, piece of shit, you piece of shit," just waking up in the morning. Anyways, this is one of the clips I relate to most. Yesterday, I was thinking again about why I don't accomplish anything really, especially why I never finished college. Up until high school, I always thought I was smart, but I really didn't have to make any effort, and I believe that going to university and realizing that I had to put some work into it, and that even when I probably wouldn't be among the best students, kind of fucked me up. I don't know why, but I think I have this need to be the best, and if I can't, then it's not worth trying. I just kept not trying, and I feel like a total waste of life at this point. I'm fairly optimistic, so I keep thinking I can turn things around. But then I look back at the past 15 years of my life in which I accomplished absolutely nothing, and I just don't know how I can make things better. Well, I have to go to work now. I didn't mean to end on a low note, but oh well. Luckily, riding my bike is my absolute favorite thing, so even when I'm absolutely depressed, my work forces me to go outside and get some mild exercise. I wish I had a question for you and Dr. Nick, but I can't think of one right now. That's kind of, this is, felt like. So I think part of the reason I wanted to read it, this non-question question, was this person, I'll also say, says they're 34 years old, which I'm also 34. And I feel like this might be dipping more into asking you questions as like a Zen practitioner than a therapist, But I don't know. This was another one of sort of this, I don't know, sort of dysthymia, sort of like I relate to this as well, where I'm just like, what's wrong with me? I'm fine, but not fine. I try therapy. It doesn't do anything. I don't know. It does something, but not really much. I'm reached this point in my life. I look back at the last 15 years and I feel like I've done fucking nothing. And I still, and all that stuff, all the like feeling like I'm always smart, but I didn't have to try. And then when I did have to try, like this is, I guess, maybe part of the reason I'm reading this one out too, is why it's so personally resonant. Maybe I'm just being selfish about that and getting a chance to talk to you about it. But this week I was having some real introspective moments and realizing among things going on that I feel like very defeated in my mind. Like, meaning once upon a time, I felt like I had a sort of ludicrous confidence, or just I wouldn't even think about it. If I had a goal, I would just try to go achieve the goal. And now I'm used to and assuming that things don't work out or won't work out. And so I kind of feel like I've beaten myself before I try anything, I expect to fail, and I do. Like I just don't finish things. So I don't know. This kind of like ennui, 30-something, feeling like you can't connect with your desires or belief in yourself, or just feeling different than you used to. That kind of a thing. I don't know. And maybe also just the fallacy. Like there's no way you can get through 15 years of your life and not accomplish anything. Like even just staying alive is an accomplishment to a certain degree. So I don't know. There's
Totally.
again not really a question, but a situation that feels bad.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is right. So this is a little distinct from kind of like the therapeutic endeavor, but you know, I mean, there's a ton to say on the topic. First of all, La Boludo, hope things get better. I know it's a mess over there. Um, it's also hard because the economy is in tatters in Argentina right now. Although they did just reach a deal with fucking BlackRock to refinance a bunch of their debt. I mean, it's crazy that a national government is having to
Dude.
negotiate with a giant cabal of private financiers to
Did you see that BlackRock,
refinance.
not to be so apocalyptic on top of this, but BlackRock just bought Ancestry.com's database for like $2.8 billion or something like that?
And
What are they going to
vindicates
do with
my
all that
decision
DNA?
to never do that. I did
Too
see
late.
that.
I'm in
I
the
mean,
system, baby.
at the same time, my cousin works for them and he's like a great dude, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway, we could talk more about that. But
I think a
but
lot of those,
anyway,
a lot of established, real quick, just those systems are full of good people. This is the same thing about the cops thing, that's the point, is like you get normal people to do these jobs like they're normal jobs. And it's like, they're just like, I'm just doing my job. I'm doing my best to be a good person. You working off. I met a guy who like works for the drone, stuff. And he's like a nice guy. He's private sector and just got this job in aerospace. And you're just like, okay, it's so disconnected from anything. Atomization. Anyway.
it's really, really crazy. But fuck, dude, I love Argentina. Like, I had such a nice time in Buenos Aires. But okay, I think I would say it like this: is that we're now kind of in the nexus of a bunch of forces, and one is like your existential search for meaning, and the other, but if we're going to just like boil it down to a template that works in this kind of back and forth, I think one issue that's emerging is the existential search for meaning, and on a kind of like a deep level, and then on a more kind of practical, mundane level, it's like, how do you articulate goals and come up with plans to achieve them, and it's like the interaction of those two things might be one way to think about this, right? So when it comes to like the search for existential meaning, I think it's a really good idea to read the giants. Like I would read What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula, which is what I always recommend to people first getting into Buddhism, and that's a free PDF now. It's just called What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. I would also read Man's Search for Meaning, which is Viktor Frankl, which is like 100 pages. The second half is like his logotherapy treatise, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading, but the first half is his experience in Auschwitz, which is, it's great. So if you just like start with those two books, it's Man's Search for Meaning and then What the Buddha Taught. And then you can kind of develop your reading list from there. Those are both easy to access places to start. But I think you got to, beyond that, consider what is meaningful for you. Maybe it's like goal achievement, and I would also try to separate that a little bit from the message you're getting from people who are just trying to profit off your insecurity, which is like all
Right.
of the basically anything you see in mass media, where like Gina and I were laughing about this the other day. I forget what it was. It was like, I don't know, some product that was being sold to women, and the question that's being begged there is like, why are you not good enough to begin with? Almost everything you see is trying to send you that message that like, you're fucked up, you're not good enough the way you are, and this is the thing that you need to buy.
Yeah.
So I would try to like take a step back from that and read first. But then the second part is about that goal achievement, and they are interrelated, but and like you pointed this out earlier, for most of human history, I mean, the vast preponderance of human history, success was just like staying alive and having enough food for your family to eat.
Right.
Like that was success. So this idea that we have to have some other kind of achievement related success, you can decide if you want to buy into that or not, but just know that it's a choice. So,
Yeah.
a real benchmark for success is probably like being healthy and being decent to the people you care about and doing your very best to have them have happy lives. I mean, that might be a completely sufficient level of achievement. The older I get, the more like meaningful that seems to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, the other half of it again is, I think, having writing down achievable goals and then making a plan for how you're going to get to those goals.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like, maybe it's finishing your degree in Argentina. Maybe that's like the goal. Short-term or intermediate term goal is like finishing your degree. And the reason it's important to have these things written down in a very short like set of declarative sentences is because whenever these interfering kind of depression related cognitions come in, like, oh, but okay, my goal is to finish my degree, but what's the point if I'm not the best? Is what's the point if I'm not the best helping you to finish the goal that you wrote down, which is that I'm going to get my degree? Is it?
Right.
Well, if it's not, then stop feeding it with attention. It's free to come and go, that thought. It's going to rise up in your mind again and again. But every time it comes up, look at that piece of paper where you wrote down your goal is to finish your degree and say, is this thought helping me achieve this goal? And if it's not, simply remove the fuel of your attention and put that on something else. And you're probably going to have to do that, I don't know, 1,000 times an hour in the beginning. You're simply training the brain to stop feeding thoughts that are at odds with your stated goals. So if the goal is to finish your degree, write that down, write down the steps of the plan in short declarative sentences and follow the steps of that plan. And anything that interferes with the steps of that plan, that is your enemy.
Yeah. That's
so, that combined with reading about, I would just say reading about from an existential point of view, what is going to be meaningful to you, and then being very vigorously defending that edifice from all the stuff that your brain just throws at it. Vigorously defending those things is probably like, the beginning of the road.
Yeah. I mean, this feels related, and again, personal. I just think something I struggle with personally is even visualizing the future. Like what you just said, like if you have a goal and a plan, you're like 70% of the way there, I feel like. Sometimes I find it challenging to even imagine a future or visualize the future. And when I go doing like the investigation of like, why is that? What's the feeling that's of the barrier to it? It's usually, I usually just, it keeps thinking it's just fear. Like there's some fear feeling of just like this uncertainty, this mostly not wanting to fail, not wanting to, something like that, which again, I know is a great irony because Gretzky, right? Like you miss all the shots you don't take. Like the fear will come true if you don't even try. But like, I don't know. Related to that thought was that I don't know. Someone said this to me before, and I've thought about this before. When I have goals, it's really trying to investigate if the goal is really my goal. And like let's say the goal is writing something, like writing a book. Sometimes it's like someone said, like, do you love writing or do you love having written? And that I wonder what you think about how. Because sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I like writing, but I love having written. Like, does that mean I just got to power through the writing?
Here's the thing is, I think what we're actually seeing here in real time is one of the barriers that people often encounter, which is, and it's like something that smart people do a lot, which is do a lot of aboutness thinking, like, do a lot of analysis and thinking. And if your goal is to build the habit of achieving small goals, then the function of that behavior is getting in the way. So it doesn't really matter if the goal is at first to just create the habit of achieving small goals, I wouldn't start with writing a book. I would maybe start with this week for 3 days, I'm going to just write for an hour.
Fuck.
And what will happen is the thought of, is this really what I like to do? Is this really speaking to my purpose? The function of that behavior is just to get in the way of you doing that goal.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it's like an important investigation that's really getting at my selfhood. None of that matters. It's getting in the way of your goal. The function. So this is why we have to think of behaviors in terms of their functional outcomes. What is the function of that behavior? It's the same as like, masturbating for 5 hours or like getting wasted in the daytime. It's stopping you from doing your goal. So
Damn.
Now analyze the function first. And again, it doesn't matter so much if like it's the right goal. Right. The purpose is to build the habit of writing down goals, writing the steps, and following the steps.
Fuck. Yeah, that's
and once you get in that frame of mind, like I fail at this all the time. I constantly fucking fail at this. But I know that the failure is not like due to any magic in the universe. It's not due to whether it's the right goal or not. It's simply due to my avoidance behaviors.
Yep.
I know that my failures, and I wouldn't even see, like, I don't think of it as like some moral failing, like, oh, what's wrong with me for failing? No, it's purely behavioral. Like, I'm coming up with avoidance behaviors because I don't enjoy the process of doing some of this early work until I'm like an hour into it. And so I'm just engaging in my avoidance behaviors. That's it. It's not some deep moral failing.
Totally.
It's just that I'm rehearsing my avoidance behaviors. That's it. So, you have to which is why mindfulness is so important, because what mindfulness allows you to do is from a distance tag what you're doing from a functional perspective. Not as good or bad. Oh, what's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. You're just rehearsing your avoidance behaviors, which is what your brain does. Avoid discomfort, like any organism does.
Yep.
So it allows you to tag it, and you're like, oh, I'm just rehearsing my avoidance behaviors. Let me go back onto my goal, which is that I'm supposed to write for an hour today. Okay. Boom, alarm. Yeah, but is this what I really do? Like, am I feeling pleasure now, or is it something different? It doesn't matter. Who fucking cares? Like, write for an hour, and then you can do all that.
I feel like a big additional one of those avoidance behaviors that I have, it's a good one, because especially good because I can couch it in like good morality, is like, what's the point of this? Is like, oh, I have a dumb story that I want to make, or movie I want to make, or something like that. And then you just go like, yeah, but what's the point? Like, there's still a lot of people dying out there.
Narcissistic that I'm writing things that are important to me. Am I actually? Who cares? None of it matters.
Exactly.
Your goal is to write for an hour. Do that.
So good. Yeah, it's so funny. Rehearsing avoidance behaviors is really good. Damn. All right. Got him. Got me. Fuck. Okay, good. All right.
So here, let me just add one thing. This is a thing that, again, smart people who have like a little bit of a psychologically informed perspective do, is they use the language of psychology or the language of therapy to actually undermine the goals of therapy. And that's like something you got to watch out for. So you can't use the language of therapy to undermine the goals of therapy. So, to just briefly return to what this person said, is I would do a little bit of work and reading to figure out, okay, what really are my kind of existential values around what's meaningful in life, and then chunk that into very small achievable goals, and just know that you're going to try to avoid those because they're uncomfortable, but nothing takes priority. No thinking takes priority over the steps to achieve those intermediate goals until they're done.
That's good. So someone said in the chat, I saw a thing that said to always have at least 2 projects going so you can procrastinate on project 1 by working on project 2. It's actually helped me accomplish more. That's a cute little.
If that works, go for it.
Oh, this is live, by the way. Whoever asked that, this is live. Okay, I got another question for you. This is the last question of the day and for us to talk about. Okay. How do you know? This is changing gears. I'm sorry if this is too sudden. That was really good. I feel got by that whole thing. I'm going to take it into the day. But anyway. All right. How do you know if you have experienced trauma. I'm pretty sure I don't have PTSD, but I think I might have grown up in an emotionally abusive household. I haven't experienced one single traumatic event, but instead a lot of little things that pile up together. Is that trauma? What is trauma? I feel like these experiences have affected my self-esteem, the way I navigate relationships, the way I see myself, and have given me anxiety and depression. There you go.
Yeah, so here's what I would say is I would be worried less about like what is trauma and have I experienced it, and more about what are the issues that I'm facing and how can I work on them. And if in the
Mm.
course of articulating for yourself what the problems are that you want to work on, you realize like, oh shit, I think part of my problem is that, for example, when someone yells, I react really defensively because yelling in my house used to mean someone getting hit. Well, now you've arrived at possibly a trauma rooted explanation for that experience and barrier. Okay. But I don't think you need to go in search of explanations for problems that aren't well defined. So I would first really try to define the problem right now for yourself. Like, what is the problem that I'm experiencing right now?
Mm.
What's getting in the way of me having the life worth living right now? And maybe in the course of defining those problems and what makes it hard for you to work on them, you may arrive at some explanations, and one of those may be, traumatic experiences. Um, but I think you don't want to start with explanations. You want to start with problems. Like, what is the problem that you want to work on? So if it's like relationships, like, what about relationships?
Mm.
Well, maybe it's that you feel like you can't be honest with people who you care about because they'll reject you. Okay, well, now that's like a coherent problem that we can start to work on. And maybe in the course of working on that problem, it will emerge that, one of the kind of roots of that problem started in like some kind of family
Mm-hmm.
dysfunction that we might label trauma. But you got to start with the specific present moment focused problem.
That's
And
good.
here's another kind of germane to this discussion and related to our earlier discussion is that sometimes just thinking about and defining behaviorally the present moment problems is so painful and difficult that it's uh, easier,
Yeah.
even though it's also uncomfortable, for us to kind of just go back in time and start thinking about what caused this nebulous issue that
Yeah.
I'm having. But the function of that is to prevent you from defining the problem in the present moment and starting to work on it in the present moment. It feels like we're doing something because we're like analyzing, what
Yeah.
happened and where it came from. But I think actually the function of that behavior is often to prevent us from working on the present moment expression of that problem.
Yeah. That sounds accurate. I guess the theme that's run through all of these today is like delegitimizing our issues, or figuring out, some type of whatever criteria we believe will be enough to say that our issues are legitimate, or whatever. And I think that just sounds like a foolish endeavor in a weird way, or more than that, probably like an avoidance behavior.
Yeah, I mean, here's the analogy that I give often is like, let's say you keep running over this fucking pothole and blowing out your tire,
Right.
okay? And like it's on your way to work. So like every day you go over this fucking pothole and you spend a lot of time figuring out like what caused this? What caused this pothole? How did it get here? And meanwhile, every day you're fucking running over it. So I think first what you need to do is fill in the pothole. Then you can figure out how the fuck did this thing get here? And if it keeps showing up, then we can do the long-term problem solving. But in the meantime, let's like fill in the pothole or pick a new route, you know?
Yes, that's so good. I used to use this analogy of like, if you knew, if you were standing on train tracks and you knew you're gonna get hit by a train, like, is your strategy like develop some bear suit, some special like train proof armor, so that when you get hit by the train, it's gonna be like, or do you just get off the train track?
Or like it's even more like how did I get here and why
Yeah,
are
right,
these
right.
tracks here?
Why are these tracks here? Why is that? What's this fucking train? Why is this train coming at me? Who made the train?
And why now? Why now of all times? None
Yeah.
of that matters until
No,
you're off the tracks.
that's very funny. Yeah, man, that's really fun. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm really enamored with this notion of just avoidance behavior overall, and just like putting the. Again, I think that's why I just have come to call it Freudian, I guess, but like whatever that sort of typical image of what talk therapy is like
Yeah.
seems so useless to me now. Is just because so much of it does seem to put you in a headspace of like navel gazing and figuring out that stuff instead of like,
Yeah.
I'm getting older every day, man. I want to get into my life. I don't want to fucking feel like I'm just stuck figuring out where it all came from. I just want to be enjoying my life now and engaging with it the way I want, you know?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, also for our Argentinian friend, I would say like the first or second question that I would recommend asking a therapist is what is your uh, like clinical orientation? Are you a behaviorist? Do you have a psychodynamic approach? Like, what's your treatment approach? I want to, and if they're like, well, like most of us will say things like, well, I'm pretty eclectic, and it's like, okay, but what are the like methods that you're trained in? Like at core, what is your lens of analysis? Is it behavioral or is it like more psychodynamic? And if they really hem and haw about that, I don't know. Like I want someone who's behaviorally trained.
Yeah.
It's good to have the other stuff too, but I think especially if you're like, I'm having concrete fucking problems in my life right now, I want someone who's behaviorally trained.
Yeah. Do you know, mind if I back up? I am curious. I do think that question is interesting. What is trauma? Like, how do you define, what do you call a trauma?
Yeah, I mean, again, like the DSM definition is having experienced, basically, it's having experienced some event or many events um, that exceed your ability to cope with. And the way that you can understand that they've exceeded your ability to cope is that you have symptoms. And the symptoms are things like dysregulation in memory, okay? Having trouble sleeping, having trouble with like hyperarousal, feeling jumpy and easily startled, maybe having nightmares, maybe having like reminders of those experiences like enter into your consciousness, which people call flashbacks, but like being triggered by a smell or something like that. Maybe feeling some cognitive or emotional numbing, again, like the memory problems or having a hard time connecting to people. There's like a varied presentation, but the four kind of like uh, umbrella criteria are hyperarousal, re-experiencing, cognitive emotional numbing, or hyperarousal, re-experiencing, cognitive emotional numbing, and avoidance behavior. Okay. So, those are the kind of like umbrella criteria, and then there are like two or three underneath each of those, stemming from a particular incident or series of incidents. That's the DSM definition.
And that's of trauma or like PTSD.
So so now it's trauma in the DSM-5. It's trauma and stressor related illness. Okay, and
Okay.
the kind of way that you differentiate is by the number of criteria that you meet and the duration of the problem. So if it's like a short term, like under a month, it would be something different from PTSD, which would like extend past 6 weeks.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. All right. So it is kind of defined by like those. If you're having these reactions to it, is how we say like, okay, well, that's something we would call trauma.
Like all DSM diagnoses, it's symptom defined. Right?
Yes.
It's defined by presentation of symptoms and their duration. Secondary to an exposure, right? The criteria A is the exposure to some traumatic incident or incidents, right? And then like what in the field people call complex trauma is when you've had like many exposures to different traumatic events.
Yeah, man, that avoidance stuff. I think I'm probably divulged too much on my dad's behalf, but I feel like he's my dad and he fucks with my brain all the time, so whatever. It's just like he sends like these group texts to my family, to my siblings and I. he's like gambling a lot again, like and he's like winning, which makes it worse almost, like, you know. And he only plays slot machines, which is so fucking crazy. But like the fact that like we're always like, please stop, please don't. Okay, cool, but please stop. You know, it's COVID. And you're okay. But on top of that, he sends these messages that he's like keeps having these nightmares, all like he hasn't had, and he's having these nightmares, and they're all like about my mom, like telling him he's not enough and bad, and my youngest brother is in them. And my youngest brother's like 25 now, you know, but he's like still a child in the dream. So it's like crazy to get these things and be like, hey, have all this trauma, you just never worked out, like you're living in 15 years ago, and you just gambling and doing all this other stuff. And it's very strange just to know that, and I guess like have someone in your life you care about a lot, who you've said all the things, you've done the intervention talks, you've done the conversation, you've done the like, and you're just like, oh, so you're just not gonna, I guess at some point you just gotta like let them do their thing, and like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, when you add addiction, I mean, addiction on top, which is very common to have on top of other problems, you know, other psychological problems, but addiction is just it's so hard. And gambling in particular, I mean, because it's the type of like variable ratio reward schedule that's the most addictive.
Mm.
Is like literally hitting a stimulus and you don't know when you're gonna get the reward, you know, like, which is
Yeah.
literally what a slot machine is. You couldn't design a more addictive. So like video games too. I mean, it's like you
Yeah.
just don't know when you're going to get that reward, how many trials it's going to take until you get that reward. And that's incredibly habit forming.
How do you differentiate? Because I think what he would say is something just like, I just like it. That, you know, like somebody
Sure.
who's clearly doing something addictive, but is like, hey, I just like it, and I'm making money at it. And you know what? Look at my life. There's not a lot of stuff there's not like a lot of good stuff in my life. I'm lonely a lot.
Yeah,
I hang out. So I like it. I just like it, you know?
yeah. I mean, again, addiction is defined by, like all DSM disorders, the core, like the a necessary and sufficient criteria is that it's causing problems in your life. For example, if you or me gambled like Michael Jordan gambles, we would have a gambling addiction. But Michael Jordan can support that addiction. It doesn't fuck his life up. He has plenty of money. He can do it. And it doesn't cause problems in his life, you know, so it's therefore not an addiction. But if you or I did it, it would be a fucking addiction because we can't support that habit.
It just feels like scary to be like, you know, it's going to cause a problem. Like I like the numbers. Check the scoreboard, man. Like it's gonna cause a problem eventually. It has in the past, you know. And it's weird to be like, is it causing a problem right now? Well, okay, like that. You know what I mean?
Well, one of the ways it can cause a problem is by messing up your relationships. So
Yeah.
if it's messing up your relationships, that's a problem. And it's probably like one of the most significant problems.
Yeah.
So that's one of the articulate criteria in DSM is it disrupting your relationships, the behavior.
Right. That's fucking. I think a lot of
something stressing your family out and causing your family a lot of pain and suffering. I'd say that's a problem. You know, that's a problem in your life.
I think we just kind of like distance from it because we're literally distanced. You know, he's in another city, and it's really. I think it's just hard to. The other thing is about it. I don't like the idea of like enforcing. You know, like addiction boundaries. Like I don't like the idea of like incentivizing somebody to get better by like punishing. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's like if I want my dad in my life to some degree, I'm not gonna be. And it causes me so much pain to imagine it just getting worse. Like, oh, everyone abandons me. They did it again. So I guess I was right. And then it'll just get worse, you know? And when it feels like it have consequences for like my grandma who he takes care of. So you're like, how do you, you know, how do you fucking.
It's so hard, man. That.
Yeah.
And I think, it's such a hard problem, and there simply is no solution in my view that's going to feel good and right. Like it's a Sophie's choice. You're just not going to get to have a suite of behaviors that makes you feel okay about this because it's not an okay situation. I think it's more like you have to come up with a set of boundaries that work for you. and that you probably have to accept the struggle over re-examining those boundaries. At the same time, realizing, you know, your moral responsibility here is not the core moral relationship because you're not the one introducing the problems. You know,
Yeah. I
so
think the boundaries have always been like a really challenging notion for me, and even I think in the last, I'll even say 5 years of my like whatever, I've started to like learn about boundaries a little better, and sometimes I think because I was so bad at them for so long, I'm sort of like dysregulated with them now, where uh meaning I'll just be kind of like if something feels like it's taking over my life in a way that I don't like, I just like close it off. I just realized, I don't know. I don't think I'm not like getting agoraphobic because I don't feel like afraid to go outside or like uncomfortable in open places, but I do feel very hermity. I do feel very like, as I increasingly feel out of touch with like possessing my own life and experience, I just start closing things off. I just start, and maybe I boundary too hard just to like be alone and do nothing, just to try to like regain a sense of like my own existence or something like that. But I don't know. Boundaries are challenging.
they really are, and I think usually what happens when we acquire a new skill is that we don't achieve a level of subtlety, and it's really that way with boundaries. So like if you were someone who typically people fall like more on one side of the spectrum or the other, right? Where someone is really good at just like you do something I don't like, fuck you, you're out forever, and like that's it. And what they have to work on is learning how to like negotiate a little bit better to have conversation where it's like, this I didn't like this, and how are we going to work on it so that you can stay in my life and I can stay in yours. But when they're learning that, they're going to go to the extreme of like having no boundary. They're going to oscillate between extremes, like having really really firm boundaries and no boundary and oscillating, and they have to kind of like work into the middle over time, and that's hard. What happens first is you get the other extreme, right? So if you are coming from a place of like, well, fuck, like everything was permitted and I just like had no boundaries, it's probably good that the first thing you learn is how to be like, fuck it, no, that crosses my boundaries, like that's it, we're done. And then so now you have the two, and you're gonna like have to work slowly into the middle. That's typically how it goes, and it's hard.
Yeah, man, just working on stuff. I like the small goals thing. I'm gonna take that away for today. I don't know why I took that turn about the dad stuff, but I don't know. It all felt like relevant at the time. I don't know. I don't want to like force these into. Sometimes we just would go so long on these episodes. Like I just talk and talk and talk, and I've been more interested in keeping them concise. But I feel like that was pretty good. We got some good questions and things. And is there anything you'd like to?
In terms of like problem solving and goals, it's really important. Is they have to be specific and achievable. Like if it's more than one sentence, it's too long. So
Got it.
if it's more than like one clause, it's too long. So specific and achievable. Someone else needs to be able to look at it and be able to know like, okay, yeah, you did that or you didn't, right? So not feeling words in there, specific and achievable. Like a Martian anthropologist would have to be able to check whether yes or no it happened. Okay. And if you wouldn't rate yourself with an 80% chance of success, especially in the beginning, pick a new one.
Okay. I like that Martian anthropologist thing is good. So that would be like you said earlier, you can't write a book, but you could say write for 1 hour, 3 days in a row.
Yeah. Or write until I feel good about my product. Nope, not specific and achievable. So give yourself something that is specific and achievable.
Even when it's specific and achievable, it is hard. I've been doing this workout plan I started this week. I had a friend write for me, and that's part of what started getting me in my head about this, like, who am I now? Like, I don't think, obviously we're doing QC for a little bit, but QC is more about like just moving, and I got a small part in a movie a friend is making, and it's so dope. It's like a legit movie and everything. It's just a one-line little thing. It's so fucking nice of them to just put me in it.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm going to use that as an excuse to, if I'm going to be on camera in a good thing, let me just look and feel my best and get on a little training program. I got like a month, sure. So I asked my friend who's Lizzie Picardi if anybody ever wants like remote coaching. She's really spectacular. She hit elite levels in powerlifting and then decided to go into figure and bodybuilding stuff for fun. And I've never seen or known someone who puts their money where their mouth is so much and is so good at the steady, boring, like hard work of. So if you want a coach and somebody who really knows about nutrition and lifting and everything, I highly recommend finding Lizzie. She's I think she's just Lizzie Picardi on Instagram now. She used to be Fresa Fuerte, like Strongberry. But I will give a small disclaimer. I think if you have certain like body issues or there's certain triggering behaviors like around like weighing food and stuff like that, maybe not the best. There's different philosophies out there of like exercise and you know fitness and stuff like that. And I generally am a proponent of just like feel good and move around. And I think that's the most important. But if you have like specific goals, this Martian anthropologist thing, it's like that's measurable and recorded is the only way to do it. And that means weighing your food and tracking like your macros every day, how much protein. And it's actually surprisingly like hard just to get, I'm on like technically a deficit and it's hard for me to eat the right, like enough. Like I've realized the way I tend to eat is like very few, very dense meals, usually like high fat and protein meals in the middle of the night. and like I definitely don't eat enough carbs. It's really fascinating. But what was getting me in my head was like she's got this program for me, like what workouts to do. And the workouts are so fucking hard. And it's just at my house with stuff I have at my house, just doing it in this bodybuilding type style that's just a lot of volume, but also just like I don't know, just hard. It just all felt harder than it used to be. I had a day that just said my cardio session was to do 10 hill sprints. And granted, I did do it in my plate carrier in the middle of the night like a psycho, like my 10-pound vest. But I was like running up and down this hill, and I was supposed to do it 10 times. Run up the hill, walk down, run up the hill, walk down, and sprint up the hill, you know? And I'm like, I did 5, and I was like, maybe that's enough. I was like fucking dying, and I did it. Granted, it was like more like a jog on the last few sets. It was so fucking hard. But I was like in my head just getting so like, why is this so fucking hard? It didn't used to be this hard. I used to be stronger and faster, and I used to want it more, and I used to be mentally stronger. That's how I was feeling. I had to do these things, these like goblet squats where you elevate your heels and try to you're supposed to stay way upright and maintain tension. And I'm just like, this is so fucking painful. This sucks. And I didn't used to feel that way. I used to like live in it and I'd be like, yeah, you know? And I was just feeling like, what changed? I was kind of getting really down on myself. I was just like, what changed? So now I'm just trying to power through and just be like, just do it. And maybe the habit will come back. And I did kind of miss a workout yesterday, meaning I knew today was a rest day, quote unquote. So I just swapped today and yesterday. But I was like, I don't know. It's even when you got it written out, sometimes I used to feel like if it was written out, if I had it, it was like basically done already, where it was like, now just do what it says. But I was like getting really bogged down by like, man, what do you do when you reach this point in your life where you're like, that superpower seems like it went away, and now it's just like, wow, this is fucking hard. And I never used to relate to the people who were just like, this is hard and I don't like it because it's hard. And now I'm one of those people.
I totally get it. I mean, I'm more and more like, you know, the working out, which I just make myself do it and I do it, you know, but I am not doing it the same way I was doing it 5 years ago.
I know.
You know, the weight, the volume, the energy, it's all different. And it's much more of a mental struggle because I'm just like me in my garage. I'm like, well, I could just stop now. Who's going to know?
Yeah.
You know? And it really is that like mental component. But here's the thing that I just have to come back to is it's not moral. It is mental, but there's nothing moral about it. Your goodness and badness have nothing to fucking do with that, you know?
Yeah, dude.
Watching The Sopranos, I'm like, is it wrong to just like get a little bit of a gut? There's some like masculine power in that,
there is, you know? Nothing. Which, as a side note, literally nothing wrong with that. Before I started this thing, I was like looking at myself like nude, and I was like, you know, you've gained a little weight in the midsection, but I think it's kind of nice. You know what I was like, this kind of suits a 30-year-old. I was like, look good for gardening and just being like, yeah, dude, I'm still like, I can move. I still got some back, but this is kind of nice. I definitely just want to say there's nothing wrong, and the aesthetic is kind of good.
This is the thing is, yeah, it's also a mental challenge. Like the mental
Yeah.
challenge. And I also feel like, success, 100% success every
Right.
time isn't the benchmark. Like
No.
you have to struggle, you got to struggle. What would it look like to never struggle? It would just be weird. I mean, I guess there are people like that, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to live in that mind.
I think
It was crazy to me.
but I mean, One
Is
Punch
this
Man.
am I making excuses to feel okay?
Yeah.
Maybe, but who cares? Fuck you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think One Punch Man is what it looks like to never struggle. Do you ever watch One Punch Man?
Fuck yeah.
It's so good.
Season 1. Season 2 I didn't feel like was as good.
It's not as good because it's different. But I was going to ask you, totally unrelated as we go out the door here. Do you think One Punch Man is supposed to be like a allegory for Zen? Like he's supposed to be like Zen? You know what I mean?
I'm not sure. I think it might be satire.
It's definitely all satire for sure. But I'm just saying, I was talking to my friends about this, that I was like, there's something really nice, and maybe why it appeals to people. First, like in the metaphor of just like, that the most powerful person in this is the person who tries the least, and also who doesn't engage in any of the shittiness of like there's a line. I actually like this line in the second season where he's like, Saitama attracts class S superheroes to him because he doesn't like compete with them, and he doesn't play the ranking games, and he doesn't care about any of it.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's like pretty wonderful.
I think so. Yeah,
Just
it's
presence.
Great. It's almost like did you know that movie Kung Fu Hustle?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, he is One Punch Man at the end of Kung Fu Hustle.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, totally free from like all the like competitive, the need
to
win.
And all of it, like just in it for.
I would like go cry at the end of that. I love that movie.
Like the idea of that. I mean, all the other superheroes in that world, like, they have their finishing move. Like that's one of the jokes I think is best in the second season. Is this guy does this where he jumps around so fast that like there's multiple versions of him. And then One Punch Man is like, oh, I'll try that basically. And he just calls it like serious sideways jumps or something. He's like, I don't know. And it's clear he just made it up on the spot. And I love that idea. It just, to me, it like takes the piss out of people who take themselves seriously. Like that's the joke of the show, is these people who have like missions and are like, I'm going to do this, or I have to be the most powerful. There's just this guy who's just like, oh, cool, oh, me too. I don't know. Funny. Anyway, all right. Thanks for chatting today. I hope this was helpful for folks who listen to some of those questions. I feel like the theme of today was like that whole like legitimizing or delegitimizing our problems, and that kind of being beside the point. That just being like totally beside the point. And I think is hit home by the thing you said at the end too, of like that a mental problem is not a moral problem. That like just like something might be mentally difficult, but that doesn't mean there's like something morally wrong with you. Like just because you're tired or you're just struggling to get through something, it doesn't mean you're like a bad person because it's a struggle. And that we really do tend to moralize everything in our culture.
Yes. Yeah. The last thing I would say is, if you think you have a problem and you're spending a lot of time thinking about like, is this actually a problem? Do I deserve to work on it? Instead of thinking about that, try just working on it and see how that goes for a while.
That's really good. Instead of thinking about it, just try working on it and see. Small goals, Martian anthropologist goals. Very good. All right. Thanks, Dr. Nick. If you guys have anybody listening who wants to send something for next week, Sundays at 10 a.m. when we do this thing, 10 a.m. Pacific on the coast. mygoodbadbrain@gmail.com. And that's pretty much it. Check us out. We're streaming it on youtube.com/jsleeper, my old YouTube channel. And you can hit us patreon.com/mygoodbadbrain as well if you want. And that's pretty much it, man. Oh, mygoodbadbrain.com if you want shirts or anything like that. All right. Thanks a lot. You got anything you want anybody to check out? Anything of?
No, that's it. I mean, I have the Twitter. I think it's Dr. Nicholas Bar 1.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, thanks, guys. We'll talk to y'all